So this is what we're going to see. I can see it on here, and you can just switch with me. It looks like it's on page 1, right at the title page.
Oh, no.
What did it do?
Good evening, everyone. This is Richard Hackett from Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting. We are getting our presentation ready to set up and begin. So the public is here, Kim, so you're ready to go.
Yeah, go there.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Sanchez, and I'm Deputy Director of Planning at Community Planning and Permitting at Boulder County. And I just want to welcome you to our community meeting tonight and thank you for your interest in this topic. This is the Lewis Coal Mine Fire Mitigation Information Meeting. So if that is what you are looking for, you're in the right place, and we will get started shortly. We are recording this meeting, and so it will be available online at a later time. And we will give you some of the information on where to find links to this meeting and FAQs later during the meeting. Just going to give it a minute or so to allow people to continue joining, and then we will begin our agenda for the evening.
Screen.
Well, once again, thank you for joining us. This is an information session on the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety's mitigation work on the Lewis Coal Mine fire. And again, my name is Kim Sanchez, and I'm Deputy Director of Planning with Boulder County's Community Planning and Permitting Department. We do have representatives joining us tonight from the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety, and they will present tonight on the state's project. And we'll also have a presentation from Boulder County's Director of Community Planning and Permitting, Dale Cate. Following those presentations, we will have time for questions, and we'll try to do our best to respond to many of the questions live. There is a Q&A feature that we will be utilizing for questions. So before we dive into the presentations, I want to cover some of the meeting guidelines for how we'll spend our time together this evening. This is a Zoom webinar format, which means the public won't have video or be able to speak. But when we do get to questions following the presentations that are given tonight, you can utilize the Q&A feature in Zoom. I'll read those questions out loud to the presenters. And because we only have 1 hour, we ask that you keep your questions related to the Lewis Coal Mine site so that we can get to as many questions as possible. We won't be allowing anonymous questions, so please do include your name in the Q&A. As stated before, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted along with the Spanish transcript to www.boco.org/LewisMine shortly following this evening's meeting. We'll also update our FAQs on the county website to incorporate questions or themes that come out of this meeting. You can access that at the same website, which again is boco.org/LewisMine. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Graves with the Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety. There are a few other representatives from the DRMS who will introduce themselves, and then they will give their presentation on this project. So Jeff, take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So I am Jeff Graves. I'm the Program Director for Colorado's Inactive Mine Reclamation Program. and we are a program within the Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety of the Department of Natural Resources, Colorado. So I have in the room with me today a number of other staff that will be responsible for implementing this project. And so I'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves around the room. So.
My name is Jeremy Renicky. I'm the project manager for the Lewis Mine Fire Mitigation and with the Inactive Mine Program in Colorado.
Tara Toffee, I'm a senior project manager with the Mountain and Coal Fire team, and I oversee the underground coal mine fire program.
I'm Chris Aaron. I'm the communications director at the Department of Natural Resources.
And I'm Erica Crosby, a senior project manager on the Front Range.
So that's all our folks. So I think at this point, Cam, are we supposed to go ahead and begin our presentation? Okay. So I think everyone can see that presentation at this point, I do believe. Okay. So we'll go ahead and Jeremy will be giving this presentation.
Hi, again, I'm Jeremy Renicky, the project manager for the Lewis Mine Fire Mitigation. The project is located at the just northeast of the intersection of Marshall Drive and Cherryvale Road in unincorporated Boulder County. The mine fire lies on 2 private properties. The Lewis coal mine was a small production mine that was mined between 1914 and 1946. It's a relatively shallow mine. The Davidson Ditch, which is a water supply ditch, predates the mining and was constructed in the late 1800s. Surface subsidence resulting from the mining began shortly after or during the Lewis coal mine, when the mining was going on with the Lewis coal mine. This picture of the site is about 1950, which is shortly after mining ceased in 1946. Much of that subsidence still remains very visible today and is visible as linear north to south subsidence depressions across the site. These can be seen both in the open space to the north of the site and down on the private property. Geology-wise, the Lewis site is located in the lower portion of the Cretaceous Laramie Formation. This lower portion of the Laramie Formation consists of sandstones and interlayered shales and coal seams. The coal seams here range in thickness from about 2 to 14 feet. And here at the Lewis site, the coal seams are bounded on the east by the Peerless Fault and on the west by the Fox Fault. Again, most of the mining in the Marshall and around the Lewis area was mined in the number 3 seam, which averaged between 3 and 14 feet in thickness. The initial cause of the Lewis mine fire is unknown, but it likely occurred from just spontaneous combustion of the coal from its exposure to atmospheric oxygen when the coal mine was left. Observations from local residents who have been there for a long time indicate that the fire has been burning for at least 50 years, which means it probably caught fire shortly after mining ceased. Today, subsidence from the mine fire and from the mine workings still continues. There's a kind of a representation of a typical kind of coal seam fire, and that's very indicative of what's happening on the Lewis site now. Coal is burning, it opens up space, the ground above it subsides, allowing fractures and a little bit and more oxygen to access and allows the coal to keep burning. In 1987 at the Lewis site, because of mine-related subsidence, a section of the Davidson Ditch was lined in concrete by DRMS to prevent further leakage into the mine workings, and hopefully to keep it from subsiding more. The mine subsidence here continues. This is a picture of the active vent area from the mine burning below. The Lewis mine fire burns at a low intensity. It is currently burning or expressing at the surface just south of the Davidson Ditch. In this picture, the top edge of that is the top edge or the south edge of the Davidson Ditch. The fire is underneath and immediately adjacent to the concrete line section. Here, just a little bit west of the active venting that I just showed in that picture, shows it's still mine-related subsidence, but it's not necessarily fire-related subsidence around the Davidson Ditch. As I mentioned before, the concrete ditch was installed in 1987. When it was installed, the ground level on the left side of the ditch was equal to the ground level on the right side of the ditch. The concrete sidewalls of the ditch are approximately 4 feet tall, so we've experienced at least 5 feet of subsidence since since the concrete lining was installed in 1987. This spring, DRMS initiated a subsurface investigation at the Lewis site to further delineate the nature and extent of the mine fire at the site. This investigation involved 27 borings. 21 of the borings, we installed temperature probes to be able to monitor ground temperature, and the remaining 6 borings, we installed piezometers to monitor groundwater levels, both in the shallow and deeper subsurface. Results from the subsurface investigation indicate that the uppermost coal bed, which is approximately 10 to 20 feet below the ground surface, is where our current fire is burning. Heat is localized in an area seen on that map, represents about 2,500 square feet. Maximum subsurface temperatures that we found in the boreholes to date are approximately 144 degrees. Surface temperatures we've measured at approximately 120 degrees. Both the surface and subsurface observations are indicative of a low intensity smoldering coal fire that's fairly localized in this one area. The RMS intends to mitigate the Lewis mine fire site by excavating the smoldering burning coal and mixing it with the overburden of rock and soil that we pull off the top of it and across the rest of the site. Additionally, the subsidence under the Davidson Ditch to the west is going to be addressed. We'll excavate there and replace the soil with compacted fill to hopefully prevent further subsidence. That'll involve removing a 300-foot section of the concrete line ditch. The excavation, I should say, for all across the site will extend below the original mine workings, which means we'll be excavating between 25 and 30 feet below the current ground surface. That's to ensure we remove any remaining coal and anything that's burning, get below the mine workings into the stratigraphy or into the rock layers below, so we don't leave anything behind. During excavation, any material exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit will be blended with the overburden or rock and soil that's removed from other areas of the site at a ratio of about 5 to 1, or I should say at a minimum ratio of 5 to 1. This process will break up any burning coal or any remaining unburned coal and isolate and disperse it throughout the soil mass to where there's nothing contiguous to burn. The cold material will also aid in bringing the temperature down of any smoldering or remaining heat. That blended material then be monitored until the temperature is lower than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. We can then use that blended material as backfill to refill the excavation. Should note that because we are dealing with potentially hot burning material, if the National Weather Service issues a red flag warning for the area, all operations in areas where there is hot material will be immediately stopped. The site will be inspected for any hot material, and that material, whether it's in a cut face or whether it's in where we're blending the material, will be immediately covered with 2 feet of cold soil to ensure that it stays on site. You should also note that before excavation begins, the site will be cleared and grubbed of any vegetation, and so the blending areas won't be within 100 feet of any vegetation. And again, as I've mentioned, in the event that where we halt for high winds, we'll cover everything that's hot with 2 feet of cover. The area where we remove the concrete ditch, that area will be backfilled with clean compacted fill. That clean fill won't contain any coal material, and it will be compacted and engineered so that to minimize any potential future future subsidence when we put the ditch back into place. The new section of ditch will be a 24-inch compacted clay liner that is similar to other areas of the ditch. Any areas disturbed by mitigation effort will be regraded at the end of the job to match existing natural topography. And then the site will be seeded with the native seed mix that's been developed specifically for the area. Some of the questions we received through the Boulder County website before this presentation began, we were able to address. One of which was, is exposing smoldering coal at the surface for cooling safe? Colorado DOMRS has safely and successfully utilized the excavate and blend method for mitigating 3 much larger fires and much hotter fires across the state. As previously mentioned, any hot material will be immediately blended with cold soil material, and in the event of any wind event, it will be immediately covered with 2 feet of cold soil. Typically, and DRMS experience at other sites, the blended material typically cools between 42 and 72 hours, or 48 and 72 hours, excuse me. So the blended material not only is no longer contiguous with any chance to move, it also cools very rapidly once it's out of the ground and spread out and mixed. Another question was asking if there would be any hydrological changes that occurred due to the mitigation of the historical mine workings. We looked at the Colorado Geological Survey. The project area is not within any significant alluvial aquifer or area of significant groundwater recharge. All the excavation work is being done will not extend below the local groundwater table. This mitigation effort should have little to no impact on the local groundwater table. Another question, the Davison Ditch in 2013, during the flooding in 2013 failed. And if the rebuilding of the ditch will address this. The portion of the Davison Ditch that overtopped during the 2013 flood event was not within the Lewis Mine Fire Mitigation Project area. The portion of the Davidson ditch that we will be removing and then reconstructing will be reconstructed to contain flows greater than the existing upstream ditch. So it'll actually handle more water than could possibly come into it from the upstream ditch. Another question asked in the 2013 and 2018, I think you're one ahead of me, sorry. In the 2013 and 2018 inventory reports indicated that the Lewis fire was partially on City of Boulder property, the open space property to the north of the site. And what monitoring has been conducted to show that it still is not ongoing on that city property. And then, although the Lewis coal mine workings do extend onto the City of Boulder Open Space Mountain Parks property, no evidence of heat or combustion has been observed since the 2013 and 5-year report. The 2018 inventory report did observe airflow that was slightly above ambient temperature, that is consistent with air moving into and out of underground mine workings, as the barometric pressure from the atmosphere equalizes with the pressure underground inside the mine workings. And that those findings were consistent, and no evidence of combustion was seen in the 2018 report. A question arose about a citizen reported smoke rising from the ground on the morning of December 30, 2021, approximately 1,000 feet northwest of the Lewis site. And we were asked if we had evaluated the site. That area was scanned thermally in the days following the Marshall wildfire, and no heat was observed at that location. Additionally, the area was again scanned recently on August 18, and then visited on the ground by DRMS personnel on August 24. No heat or evidence of coal combustion was observed in the area. This is the thermal scan from the 2022, shortly after, January 2022, shortly after the wildfire. And I guess the main point is the location in question, or the dark purple, just at the just to the left of Cherryvale Road. And for just kind of a reference point, there's some intact structures in the upper left-hand corner, which you can see are bright white, indicating they're hot, just hot from having their heating systems. Those are intact structures that were not burned in the fire. And as you can see, there's nothing in the field that shows any thermal anomaly. Another question asked if the Lewis and Marshall mine networks are connected. The mines at the Lewis site and the mining at the Marshall Mesa Trailhead site are not connected. They're separated by the Fox Fault, which I mentioned earlier, which cuts vertically through and separates the coal layers in the Laramie Formation. Additionally, they lie on opposite sides of Marshall Creek. Marshall Creek is a perennial gaining stream that represents the intersection of the water table and the ground, excuse me, and the land surface. That would mean that any potential workings that did cross under there would be thoroughly flooded because they're below the groundwater table. We did receive a question regarding the Marshall site and potential reclamation at Marshall Mesa trailheads. This past winter, DRMS conducted a subsurface investigation at the Marshall Mesa trailhead, where we installed 67 temperature monitoring points that complemented 9 pre-existing temperature monitoring points already at the site. DRMS continues to monitor the Marshall site and is currently developing the mitigation plan in coordination with the city of Boulder and Boulder County. Mitigation efforts are tentatively scheduled to begin in the summer of 2024. And then last of what long-term monitoring will be conducted. At the Lewis site, several of the temperature monitoring points that were installed during the subsurface investigation will not be affected by the excavation and will be left in place for future monitoring. And the site will be continually monitored for the effectiveness of, in the near future, for the effectiveness of the mitigation effort. And then, is there a point of contact with the state for the community to reach out with questions? DRMS has opened a specific email for the Lewis Mine Mitigation Project. It's listed here, DNR_Lewis_Mine@state.co.us. And once we get a little closer on October 1st to the mitigation effort starting, a web page that will be linked off of DRMS's homepage specifically for the project will be available, and that will be updated with significant milestones and project progress as we move through. I think one thing I failed to mention earlier is our schedule for the mitigation effort is roughly, we hope to get started mid to late October, and then have the project done and completed by March 1st of 2024.
So I think that's all we have for our presentation and addressing the questions that we received prior to this meeting beginning. So.
All right, well, thank you. Before we address the questions that are coming into the Q&A, I'm going to turn it over to Dale Case, who's the Director of Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting, for a few comments on the county's process. Dale?
Yeah, thanks, Kim, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We really appreciate everybody taking the time, and the folks at the state for helping go through the project today. I think that was really helpful and informative presentation. So from the county's perspective, from a regulatory piece, any project this size, we would have a permitting process for. Anything that grading this much earth and putting things back requires us to look at those impacts, look at ways to mitigate those impacts so that we get a project that really works all around from a land use perspective and is consistent with our code. In this case, we've got some extenuating circumstances that we're trying to really work through with the issue of the underground fire, the ditch timing and so forth, and trying to make sure that we can accommodate the process and not do something that's going to jeopardize this being able to be mitigated. So we've worked with the state to better understand the project, and we'll be doing a bit more of that in the next few weeks with them, and running it through a sort of abbreviated process where we can look at those impacts that we normally look at through a land use process of what happens during construction. Are there traffic impacts? Are there impacts on people in the surrounding area from construction noise and timing, access issues, parking, lots of things that I think we've already looked at a little bit, and there's not that many impacts. We'll work with, we've gone on site with the Office of Disaster Management, and we'll work with them and the local fire protection district too to make sure what is being proposed as mitigating factors while the project is going on are things that work for us and help protect the residents of the county at the same time. And then, we'll look that during or after the project's over, what are the reclamation pieces that are happening? Is it consistent with sort of the environmental aspects of what the county sees as important? The native grass seed that was mentioned, the recontouring of the land, make sure all that is done in a way that is consistent with the county's values and code as it moves forward. And also look at what is that long-term monitoring of both the revegetation piece of it and of the coal fire itself, and what is going to be important, and as we implement some provisions that require monitoring over the long term, and trying to work with the state to figure out what that looks like. And also hearing from all of you. We've got lots of residents on the line here, and so always kind of understanding what concerns the community has as a project moves forward, to make sure that on this site, at dealing with this specific project, we're being able to take into account those concerns and make sure that they're looked at, they're verified, and we mitigate them when possible. So we're going to be doing that over the next few weeks with the state, and issuing a determination for them so that they can move forward with this project. Jonathan Tardif, who is part of this meeting, as well as the planner who will be working on that, and we'll put his contact information into the chat here for you all to have. And so if you have things, issues or concerns or ideas, we'll take a look at those as we move forward. But I think it's something that we can really try to accommodate what we've heard from the community as concerns with these coal fires. The state really coming together with a plan to address it, and so trying to get it through the review process and into construction is where we're at the moment. So that is what I had for everybody.
Great, thanks so much, Dale. So next we will open it up to questions now using the Q&A feature. So in Zoom, you can click on the Q&A feature and type in your question, and we'll try to address them one by one as they come in. So let's go ahead and start with the first question, which is, why not let the fire burn until the coal is consumed rather than spending money to put out the fire?
Sure, this is Jeff. I can address that question, Kim. So I think our concern on this site is we've seen activity increasing. And as those coal fires burn and as that coal is consumed, you end up with surface subsidence that can then expose that hot coal to any of that vegetation that's around those open vents. And so as the coal is consumed, we end up with a much higher risk for wildfire ignition through coal combustion, subsidence, and then eventual exposure of that dry adjacent vegetation to those hot temperatures. So I think our concern is that if this were left to continue to burn without any kind of mitigation, we have a much higher risk of wildfire ignition on site. Additionally, our concern is that future subsidence as this coal is consumed would potentially create problems for the ditch through that section and might result in flooding if the ditch were to collapse. We've seen settlements along that concreted section of the ditch, which if we had a large segment collapse underneath there, that concrete probably would lose stability, and so that ditch could fail. So those are our two biggest concerns with leaving that coal in place and allowing it to burn.
Okay, our next question is from Paige Leonard. This question is, in the investigation, were all reports of smoke from Cherryvale Road investigated and followed up with interviews and site visits?
So we certainly can't speak to what the investigators did in regards to any noted smoke plumes. I mean, we were made aware of the smoke plume adjacent to Cherryvale, and we did visit that site. But in regards to anything additional that was reported to investigators, we can't speak to that.
All right, next question is from Rob Harris, asking, can you speak to what threats this underground fire potentially poses and why mitigation efforts were decided to be taken?
And I think I already spoke a little bit to the threats that we're concerned about. So it's potential wildfire ignition as a result of exposure of burning coal at surface. And then also the potential for subsidence to impact the stability of that ditch. The reason that mitigation efforts are taken now is we've seen increasing activity at the site, suggesting that that coal is combusting more quickly. And could result in subsidence, which could increase those subsurface temperatures and then eventual exposure of that hot coal at surface.
Okay, our next question is from Anne Brennan. And that question is, the Marshall Fire showed how fast wind can create a devastating wildfire from buried smoldering coals. What evidence do you have that you can control smoldering coal on the surface if the wind comes up faster as quickly as it did the day of the Marshall Fire?
I'll have Tara address that because she has experience mitigating coal mine fires using this method in Colorado.
Yeah, hi, this is Tara Taffy. So when we're excavating the small, first of all, just to kind of explain the excavation, the pieces of ground coming up are not dust particles that are burning. Generally, you're gonna have like chunks of rock that are maybe a couple inches across or larger. And then additionally, as we're excavating a small portion of the material we're excavating is actually coal. So there's a lot more non-combustible material than there is coal. And so as it's blended and mixed and spread out, I would say we did approximately close to 400,000 cubic yard excavation outside of Craig, and we never saw in high winds a spark leaving. And then on top of that, I understand that the winds came up very quickly the day of the Marshall Fire, and unfortunately I don't live here, so I don't know if there was a red flag warning or any kind of high wind warnings for that day, but there was a cold front that moved in that day, and so I believe the high winds were predicted. And so in that situation, we would not be excavating as a cold front is predicted to come in during the day. And if that cold front was predicted, we would make sure that the site was covered prior to leaving the day before, or kind of watching the weather and see what's going on. The other thing is we are going to have wind monitoring on site, so that if we do have localized winds, we'll be able to make assessments on the work that we're doing in real time.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Megan Monroe, and I think this one is more directed to the county. Can county speak to the conflict between Article 19 expiring 5 years after the fire event and the required mitigation timeline? Has the county considered extending Article 19 and tax incentives to support those in the community waiting with rebuilding to better understand the mitigation needs rather than rush to meet Article 19 deadline?
Sure. Thanks, Megan, for that question. A little bit broader than the fire topic, the coal seam fire topic here, but I think we will work with the community. I haven't heard much feedback as far as the timing at this point, but we'll come out and listen to you and the community, understand your timing, understand where folks are at as they work to rebuild. And if there are things that we can do to help folks be able to relax and move forward in a timeline that meets their needs, we're willing to listen to that and see if adjustments need to be made to those regulations as we move forward.
Thanks, Dale. Our next question is from Gordon Pedro. Why now if the fire has been burning for 50 years?
I think this is Jeff Graves again with DRMS. I think we're just seeing increased activity on site. We've seen additional subsidence. There's more surface venting. And so we feel like as that fire has consumed coal underground, it's opened up more void space for oxygen to move. And so that is thereby increasing fire activity. And so we've just seen increased activity on site. And so that's the motivation for doing this work at this time.
Thank you, Jeff. Our next question is from Rob Harris. Do we know why the combustion is happening more quickly now as opposed to the decades before it has been burning?
I'll answer that again because I think it kind of tees off of the last question somewhat. We have seen more subsidence, which opens up additional pathways for oxygen flow. And really the coal combustion is driven by access to oxygen. So as new pathways open up through the combustion and removal of that coal and eventual subsidence, you get increased oxygen flow into that area where the coal is combusting. And so that increases that process. So it's kind of a closed loop that just feeds itself over time as you increase the oxygen exposure.
The next thing that I see in the Q&A is from John Gossard. I observed what I feel was a spontaneous eruption just west of Wildflower Court and 1,000 feet south. Is it planned to do a core boring to determine if this is part of a coal vein which erupted?
At this time, we're unaware of this spontaneous eruption, so we don't have any planned drilling activities at that location. And all of our current drone flights with thermal imaging don't indicate that we have fire anywhere outside of the Lewis site that we have as part of this project currently. But if we do have indication that there's some surface expression of coal combustion, we can look at that as a potential investigation in the future.
Thanks, Jeff. We have two questions submitted from Paige Leonard. The first one, is trash burning on top of coal fire areas a concern?
I don't think so in this location. I don't think we have any coal waste directly exposed at surface. I mean, it would be a concern if somebody was burning trash on top of coal waste, actual coal material, but I'm unaware that that's occurring at this site.
And her second question is, will any part of the investigation be reopened to reevaluate the eyewitness report of smoke from the site northwest of Cherryvale? Yeah, I think I can respond to that, and that we're really not taking any questions related to the investigation, but you could look at the website that's available with information from there, and I suppose further contact the sheriff's office. Okay, next question. Paul, sorry, I won't say your last name, Paul, because I am worried I will mispronounce it, but Paul says, thank you for your presentation. In addition to cold soil coverage, are you planning on staging other firefighting equipment?
Yeah, we are, sorry, this is Tara Taffy with DRMS. We are planning on having at all times a 21,000 gallon storage tank of water on site. So if something were to flare up, we would be able to quickly knock it down.
Okay, and it looks like the last question that we currently have in the Q&A tool is from Trevor. Related to Anne's earlier question, what is the plan to cover or protect hot material in the case of sudden, parenthetical, gusty outflow boundary winds from a thunderstorm, for instance, rapid wind speed increases?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, as Jeremy explained in the presentation, there will be, the vegetation's all going to be cleared away from this site. So that is our first kind of protection. The second will be the areas that we're going to be blending are not going to be very large. We're not going to be blending over multiple acres or anything like that. the areas will be covered with 2 feet of soil, and that can be done really rapidly. And we're going to be working in, Jeremy, what size cooling areas did you have specified? I don't exactly remember. Was it 50 by 50 feet?
Right,
Yeah, I mean, these are not large areas that are going to have smoldering coal materials in them. So covering them with 2 feet with a bulldozer should be relatively rapid. And we will have those materials will be stockpiled right next door to
And,
the pad.
and this is Jeremy Renicky. I'll also mention that we're not solely going to rely on the National Weather Service warnings. We will have on-site wind gauges, so we can respond very quickly to any localized wind. And if we see a thunderstorm coming, then we're going to default to stopping work. And one note to emphasize is, as you may have seen on the heat map in the presentation, the actual area of hot ground is relatively small. And out of the 50,000+ cubic yards we intend to move on this project, only about 2,500 to 3,000 cubic yards of that will actually meet our threshold of hot of being, and we consider hot anything above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a very small proportion of the site and volume of material that will be involved. But we will very much be monitoring not just weather from the National Weather Service, but on-site weather observations as well.
We've had a few more questions come in the meantime. So the next one is, what other remedies were considered besides mixing?
Excavation and mixing at this site was the only remedy that we determined would be effective for putting out or for extinguishing the underground fire. It is the most effective remedy used in coal fires nationwide. It's been the only real effective remedy that we've had in the state for extinguishing coal fires, and that's why it was selected. In the past, we've actually used kind of a dig and quench, where we dig and then we quench the materials with water so that they're soaking wet. We use water and then a Class A firefighting foam. However, the firefighting foam in the water can actually exacerbate heat issues and drive the heat up as as steam is created. And it can also insulate the pads as we're cooling. And so you get cool on the surface, but they're still hot underneath. In previous projects, we actually stopped the blend or the quenching and just moved to a blending and found that the materials cooled significantly faster that way.
And I think you've addressed this for the most part, but a follow-up to that last question was, how was mixing blending selected? So if you have anything more to add, please feel free.
Just that is the most effective method that we have employed in the state to put out coal fires.
All right. Looks like there's another question. Is the emergency water you just mentioned enough?
I think we feel like it's sufficient in terms of quantity. Also, I think as Tara mentioned, having sufficient cover material on site if we do get a situation where we have high winds. And then on top of that, as Tara mentioned, the additional grubbing and removal of vegetation of the surrounding area makes it such that there's very little combustible material available. So we do feel like the amount of water we have within that tank as specified should be sufficient.
Okay. Next question, what will this project mean for the property owners for the site?
I mean, it'll be a reduction of risk associated with their property in terms of having a actively combusting coal mine fire. It also reduces risk associated with subsidence and potential impact to the Davidson ditch and conveyance of water. So I think overall it should be a property improvement for those adjacent landowners. And then also, Tara just mentioned the emissions associated with that coal fire. So it'll be a reduction in emissions. So it should be an overall improvement to the property owners.
Okay, well, that was the last question for now. We do have about 2 more minutes that we can take any more questions. So I'll just give it a moment and allow any members that are in attendance to fire any last questions that they have into the chat. There's one. Okay. I'm late to the meeting, so pardon if this was covered already. Do you have a need for any citizens to volunteer towards projects like these or monitoring?
I mean, we're always interested in having the public make us aware of situations that are of concern to them if they come across areas that they believe are actively combusting, something like that associated with a coal mine. We're always interested in any kind of public feedback associated with that, or dangerous openings or anything related to abandoned mines. But in terms of volunteers, at this time, we don't necessarily need any.
Okay, and one other question, what is the earliest anticipated start date for the excavations?
This is Jeremy Renicky. The earliest possible start date would probably be the 3rd week of October for excavation to actually start. At the earliest, we'll mobilize onto the site in mid-October. Clearing and grubbing excavations, or clearing and grubbing, removing the vegetation would be unlikely to start before the end of October.
Can you speak to how common or uncommon these underground mine fires are?
I mean, we can state that we have at least 38 underground coal mine fires throughout the state. Some are in various stages of combustion, some are somewhat dormant. So I don't know if that means they're necessarily common, but we do have quite a few in Colorado.
And I would say that there's underground fires in those areas that were coal mined throughout the country.
Yes.
I heard you mention that there will be revegetation as well as monitoring of the revegetation. I am concerned about the increase in weed growth since the fire. Can you speak to this process?
Yeah, we will be working with Boulder County and the city of Boulder on an approved seed mix. Additionally, we will be likely limiting our use of a strong nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium NPK fertilizer, and looking to potentially use some products that will enhance native grass growth and potentially limit cheatgrass and other weeds from growing. The biggest issues with the coal fires and vegetation is cheatgrass. So our #1 goal will be to keep cheatgrass off of the areas where we're doing remediation. And then in addition to weeds, I would say any areas within our work area that do establish weeds, we would try and kind of nip those in the bud, for lack of a better term, pretty quickly within the first growing season, and then work with the landowners beyond that. Additionally, I do want to mention that it is part of our specifications for our contractors that all equipment is washed prior to bringing it to the site and inspected, so that there's not, other weeds and other things coming in from other parts of from other places they've been working.
And I believe that the previous answer to this was no, but just to be sure, We have a question asking, have you found any vents in the area where John says he saw smoke near Wildflower entrance? And I think that area that they're referring to is west of Wildflower Court and 1,000 feet south.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we visited the site last week on, I think, was it Thursday? We were on site. We did not find any evidence of any venting or mine fire in that area. There is further west of that kind of area near Wildflower Court. We did see there was quite a bit of subsidences that were being dealt with a different project that DRMS is doing. We also revisited the thermal imagery from January 14th, 2022. So about 2 weeks after the fire, we did not see any evidence of heat in that field. And then we also did look at it through thermal again recently, about 2 weeks ago. And again, we did not see any evidence of mine fire in that area.
And maybe for the last question, I'll turn this comment into a question. Will there be any ongoing monitoring of that area?
I mean, we're going to be in the area. I mean, we're probably not going to be doing overflights with our thermal drones on a consistent basis. But if someone notices something out of the ordinary, some kind of thermal anomaly, you notice significant snow melt over a particular like subsidence or something after snowfall, certainly make us aware. But at this point, we've not observed anything that suggests we have active combustion in that area.
Okay. Well, I think we got through all of the questions just a minute before time. So again, just thanks to all of the public who have shown interest in this project. We appreciate you joining us this evening. Thanks to the state and to the county representatives for being available this evening to answer any questions. We will, just a reminder that we'll post any questions and themes that we've heard this evening to our FAQ, and you'll be able to find a recording of this meeting with Spanish translation at boco.org/LewisMine. And that link is available in the chat. Additionally, Rick Hackett just posted into the webinar chat that additional questions may be directed to the state, and the email is there along with the website. So again, thank you everybody for attending tonight, and we will post more information on the website. Thank you. That concludes the meeting.